I'd like to welcome our panel this afternoon. We've got Lauren Batty, Cami Siddiq, Mallory Moorhead, Naveed Mushtaq and Rosie McEachern. So I will actually hand over to each of them just to introduce themselves and their roles so you're familiar with where they're from. Just before I do that, the window of luncheon has actually opened. So we've 2 hours now where lunch is served downstairs on the 3rd floor. You can't bring food back up, but there is time. There will be time to eat it, enjoy it, and network in those 2 hours. So hopefully you're not all going to rush off now, but just take it easy as we go through the next 2 hours. So over to my panel. Can I start with Mallory to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Mallory Moorhead, a project manager at the Bradford Institute for Health Research, and currently I'm on maternity leave about 7 months in, but prior to that was coordinating the Act Early Homewood program, for which Lauren here has really taken the lead on community engagement.
Thank you, Mallory. And can I ask Lauren to introduce herself?
Hi, my name's Lauren. I lead an organisation called Out Loud. We're a creative education company that specialise in therapeutic interventions. We are based in Homewood and they've been working really closely with Mallory and the team on the Act Early project, doing the community engagement side of that data science experience. So.
Thanks, Lauren. And Naveed, please.
Afternoon, folks. Naveed Mushtaq. I'm currently based in the multi-agency child exploitation hub within Bradford. Prior to that, I have extensive experience of working in schools and education in particular.
Thank you. And Cami.
Hi everyone, I'm Cami Siddiq. I'm the Community Engagement Manager for a project called Jump. I was promised a sold out crowd and obviously timed it really badly with lunch. I'm sure we'll be waiving the fee for this one. We run a programme which is funded by Sport England, essentially working with families and children to increase levels of physical activity.
There'll be plenty of time for your butties, Cami, don't worry. And Rosie, please.
Hi everybody, my name's Rosie McEachern. I'm the director of the Born in Bradford Research Programme, which essentially is a project all about how we can keep families healthy and happy. And I guess what I find particularly exciting about the Born in Bradford Research Programme is that we are genuinely aiming to be a people-powered research programme. So we have community engagement and co-production at our core. So it's really great to be able to join these amazing people to talk about, I guess, some of the challenges and how we try to do it.
Thank you. So I'm shortly going to pose some questions to our panel members, but I'm hoping yourselves will join in. We do have a roving mic that Mary at the front will come to you if you put your hand up. So please don't be shy in coming forward with your questions. These panels are aimed at being interactive, so don't be shy in putting your hand up. So our panel now is tasked with sharing their insights and experiences about improving community engagement. As you've heard from their introductions, they are represented a wide range of organisations and sectors. And we'll be interested to know how cross-sector working also plays a part in successful community engagement. I've recently been reading Hilary Cotton's Radical Thinking book. It's quite old now because it was written in 2015, but she makes some important points around community engagement. They're quite intuitive and logical when you see them written down. One of the points she makes is when we think about approaches to tackling community issues and finding solutions, we often think about we need lots and lots of resource to underpin our engagement. We often get fixated on money, grants, contracts and cost. But there are multiple forms of resource in all our communities, from relationships, knowledge, time, skills, sometimes possessions and assets. She talks about how traditional solutions for communities and citizens often start with, can we afford it question. It's an important question, but it keeps us fixated in the now and in existing systems. Instead, we should try to think about the vision and capabilities and ask about wider forms of resource are available and can we connect them together in productive ways. We then will start in a very different place. So enabling communities to grow their own capabilities is both dynamic for the helper and those seeking help. So I'm going to now start posing the questions to our panel members, so I hope they're ready. And of course, please do put your hand up if you want to add something or have a follow-on question. So the first question panel is, what are the enablers for effective community engagement? Who would like to go first?
Can I go first? Because I guess I'm going to give the most boring answer, and these guys are going to be able to give a much more nuanced answer. So barriers and enablers, yeah? So
Enablers, yeah.
Yeah, so from my perspective, running a research programme, which we are like fully committed to learning from the experience of communities, a real challenge for us is it does come down to funding. So to do really effective community engagement and to work with our communities and to grow with our communities, that takes a lot of time. The way research is often funded doesn't give appropriate recognition to the real importance of developing that community infrastructure. And so we spend a lot of time, we have a team of researchers, but actually a lot of the time our researchers are out in communities speaking to people. And it's really important that you have to have that investment and commitment in time, and that it's not, you cannot drop in for one project and then leave again. So it's about how do we build this capacity within our city and work together. So that's my overall sort of view on it.
Thanks, Rosie. Mallory?
I was just going to say, I think in response to that, I think one of the major enablers of good sort of community engagement is to actually rely on community-based groups that already exist in the community. And I think one really good example that we have here is with Lauren's group. They were already sort of based in Homewood, knew the community and had their trust, and made sure that the work was going forward, that people in the community were coming to events. And I think we'll have the best ability to really carry the work forward because they're going to be staying beyond the initial funding in this particular project.
Yeah, I'll just jump off that as well. And I think what has worked really well within the Homewood project particularly is that because we were already embedded within the community, as Mallory said, we had that trust of the community already, but also we understood what the needs were of the community, what they wanted, what would draw them in. So for us, we knew a themed event where there's food would bring them in. Whereas actually someone from, I mean, that's quite generic to be honest, but someone from outside of the estate might not have had them community connections for people to then be encouraged to come along. So I think that has been a real strength, that we've understood the community and to be able to then give them what they want. And then we've listened to them and delivered on what they ask. As we know, communities ask for all sorts of stuff sometimes and we can't deliver on everything. But actually, if we can show the community that we're listening to them and that we're responding to their needs that they present to us, then they feel there's a need and there's a value in them engaging with us because they're seeing in the proof that we're responding to what they're saying to us, and that being a two-way thing and not just being a one-time event, one-time consultation and then we're done, but it being a two-way conversation and the community feeling constantly heard, constantly listened to and constantly involved in what we're doing.
Yeah, just another one just to add on to that. I think it's really important that when we do take part in consultations and engage with communities that we're not just raising expectations. We obviously know that we're in an environment where we have austerity and budget cuts on a regular basis, that actually we're not going in and saying, we're asking you for your opinion because we're going to deliver this. It's just, we are asking for your opinion because you are core to this community, you are the community. I think all too often organisations drop in and parachute in and give these big grandeur designs and ideas about what might happen, which sometimes in the minds of communities makes them think that this is definitely going to happen. So I think it's really important that that's managed with the expectations of individuals within communities as well, and that's essentially the role of organisations like ourselves at Born in Bradford, or bigger organisations that are working within the city.
Naveed, would you?
For me, I suppose, how well do you know your communities? Have we had the opportunity as professionals to walk the streets, to understand the deprivation, to understand the context, the health inequalities, or the poverty, or the barriers that the families and the communities face? An example of that would be, for me, in education, and I pose this to my education colleagues and say, please embed in your admission processes a mandatory home visit before the child even enters your door. Get out into the family home, speak to the family, sell your school and your vision by all means, but understand the context of that family and their journey to them arriving at your school. And very early on, you will see and understand the context, the background, the family dynamics, and you're able then to put in a plan of action before they even arrive within school. And that's just, on the admission process. If I look at teachers within education, we used to do a walk round for all newly appointed teaching and non-teaching staff within the area that I worked in. I've been privileged to work in Canterbury, West Bowling, Marshfield, Breedy 3, Girlington, Manningham, Homewood. So born and bred in Bradford. And it's got to be an intrinsic passion and desire to deliver community development. And you don't need masses of money sometimes. You just need a willingness and a desire and a passion and care to listen and to show people that you're empathetic and you're transparent. And I suppose I could go on and on. That's why they put me at the end, because nobody else then gets a chance. But ultimately, I think there's some really quick fixes, some really small things that we can do that have massive impact. And communities need to be feel that they're trusted. And you've got to be a face and an ear as well. And that's it.
Sorry, this is
Yeah,
really
yeah.
a difficult job for you to manage this.
Go ahead.
But just to follow on, I absolutely agree with you, everything you said and the passion. And I think what I don't think we're doing as well as we should be, is how we listen bottom up from communities. And they should be telling service providers, educationalists, research programs what needs to happen. What I see happening at the minute is that often we come in topic focused. Okay, we have money for obesity or physical activity, or we want to look at housing or the environment. We need to turn the tables. And it is about going out, listening to communities, but then having the channels by which the community voices can then influence how the money is spent in our city, what gets commissioned. And that is a really different way of doing things.
Thank you, Rosie. And I think
Sorry, but I'll just quickly say on that. We found exactly the same thing in Homewood. The Act Early programme had a list of priorities that we were commissioned as the community engagement partner to explore with the community. The first community event we did, we found that the priorities of the programme were not the priorities of the community. And as we are so invested within our community, it was really important for us to go with what the community was saying were their priorities. And it was a bit of a challenge actually to look at how do we marry the two different priorities together, and how do we get the community's priorities back to the programme, for the programme to understand that their priorities were further along the line than where the community were currently at, and that there was some other stuff that was quite fundamental and base level that needed to be addressed before then their initial priorities could be addressed. So yeah, we experienced that.
So sticking with sort of deeper listening and making sure we listen effectively. It's not just listening with your ears, it's also kind of looking with your eyes and seeing the unseen things, isn't it, in communities, which helps build a richer picture. So just sticking with what are the enablers for effective communication, I'd like to throw that question out to the audience, or have you got any reflections you'd like to reflect on with us and share with us this afternoon from what our speakers have just said?
I would totally agree with that.
Jane, can we just get the roving mic to you so everybody can hear? Thank you.
I was just saying I would wholeheartedly agree it's about trust, and that takes time to build, time and being there to engage with your community so that they get to know you and they actually trust in what you're saying. So I would just echo what you said.
Thank you, that's helpful to hear. Anybody else? Got a hand up, just second row, in front there. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't catch your name, Lady Bond. Lauren. Hi, sorry. When you say about talking to communities and what, for instance, what was necessarily what the top say topics is providers and what that considered. Did they listen to that when you reported it back? And did they agree? And did they change the way they funded things, or do they kind of stick to their agenda?
We're not quite there in looking at the next phase of the project yet, but I think there's definitely been a two-way conversation and a shift in focus that has come from us being able to say this is what the community are saying, and I think it's been welcomed for us to look at the community's needs, and rather than, because they could have said, well, actually, they're our agenda and stick with our agenda. But actually, there's been that flexibility and that conversation to be able to work together to look at how do we morph the two priorities. And actually, some of them marry up quite well. But on paper, when you look at them, they can seem quite black and white at first. So it's definitely been a process. And I think further down the line as we're going, there's going to be able to have them conversations around where the priority shifts for then funding to be able to shift in the same way. So we're on the journey.
Yeah, I work for Kirklees Autism Group, and quite a lot. We take a lot of stuff, and then the commissioner that kind of like is on the partnership board, it's like, that's not what we were talking about. Those, it's like, well, no, but I couldn't make people talk about something they didn't want to talk about. This is what they want to tell you about. So sometimes it feels kind of performatory, doesn't it? Asking people, and if you don't get back what you're wanting to hear.
Yeah, and I think, performatory is a good word to use, and I think when you're an organisation that's totally embedded in the community and sees these people day in, day out, week in, week out, if we put on a performance, they're going to smell that a mile off and then not want to come to anything else that we deliver on. So it was really important for us to remain authentic, because the trust that we've built up has taken a long time. So we didn't want a project like this to dismantle all that work and trust that we've built. So yeah, we kind of worked the two together, and it worked quite well in the end.
And there's a question about the sixth row back. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Lisa, and I'm a professional primary academy in BD3. And I understand what you're saying about winning the trust. One of the best jobs I like about my job as a teacher is being on the morning gate, welcoming parents. That smile, okay, I only speak English not very well most of the time, but I know if I give the parents a smile, say hello, and just greet them and meet them every morning, it just makes such great communication, and it builds bridges, and being authentic as well. And it's the fact that I care about their children. And that smile is just such an amazing thing. So I just want to say that morning smile really builds those bridges through communities. Thank you.
Thank you, and your passion's clearly coming through there. Thank you for sharing that. We've got a question, second row from the front, please.
Good afternoon, my name's Ken Sanderson. I work for Relate, we're heavily involved with schools, but what I wanted to say was, in some ways I feel very blessed, and in other ways cursed, because in 2000 I started working in local authority. So it's a bit like, I've heard a lot of this before. I remember in Coventry in 2004, I was talking about something called asset-based community development. And it's just simple. We use the micro elements in that community to inform the macro planning, and use those leaders within that community to influence what we actually do. And it is as simple as A, B, C, D, but we haven't used it.
I mean, that's certainly a method, isn't it? The ABC engagement. ABCD engagement model. So thank you, Ken. Sticking with that line of enquiry, let's move on to the next question, because I want to follow up in terms of what engagement methods have you found successful in engaging parents and communities?
Sorry, Catherine, can we just go to the third row?
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed somebody.
I'm just conscious.
Sorry to miss you. We'll come with the roving mic,
Just pop me out.
and then we'll come back to the question. But yeah.
Thank you, Naveed. I'm Jo from Public Health. Just a really quick one to the panel. We're challenged as the commissioners of lots of services across the district that we offer whole service district-wide. Actually, needs are very, very niche in our communities. So it's what you say, Lauren, about what might be work for Homewood, probably wouldn't work for somewhere else. So just a quick question to people like me, how would you say we make that fit? Because one size doesn't fit all, but we have one budget, one health visiting service, for example, but we have lots of differing needs. So how do we answer that? Thanks, Cammy.
Thanks, Jo. I don't think one size should fit all. I think the idea that as organisations, as people that run the city, we're going to make our jobs any easier by doing it the same way across the city. We are nuanced. We are a very diverse city, and the communities that I've worked with in the past are very diverse. So one size shouldn't fit all. I think in my mind, there's modes of transport and there's specific vehicles as well. So the mode of transport that we use is co-production, co-design, co-delivery. That's going into communities and speaking directly with those stakeholders within communities about what's important to them. They develop an action plan based on what is important to them, and they deliver their action plans. That's essentially, for me, that's the mode. The vehicles are different. They differ across the district. I worked in Ollerton and Low Grange most recently, and then now moved into Windhill. And the priorities that they've come up with are very different. It's so diverse. But that's down to them. That's down to each individual community to decide what's important for them and how they're going to deliver that. And we've seen it work. We've got Chris at the back who runs one of the schools in Ollerton, and we've seen it work really, really, really well. And then we've got other examples where it's not worked as well. But this idea that we have to do the same across the city because that's what our priority is. Actually, that's not the priority of local people. That's not the priority of families. It's food, shelter, and clothing, and that's the top and bottom of it. We've gone into very tough situations and seen a lot of families in dire straits, to be honest. And me coming in and saying, "Oh, do you know what? You should be doing some physical activity." It's not important. It's absolutely not important. So the thought process for me is let's work with anything and everything, and then talk about physical activity.
Just in addition to that, though, not to provide a counter narrative really, but there's some common denominators and common themes within the health inequalities in particular. So we look at year 6 children within Bradford District, levels of obesity across the district are far too high, and that's something that's across the board. So I totally get the individuality, and yes, one size doesn't fit all, but there are some common themes, mental health across our young generation, and especially in terms of exploitation, coming out with a multi-agency approach. We see that it's one of the primary factors of children with exploitation, mental health concerns and their needs. So I think there are some common denominators, common factors that we can work across the district on, still work on, because I think we haven't achieved our objectives in that. But at the same time, there are obviously individual areas that have individual needs, and it's being responsive to that. But again, I come back to the point, not to reiterate that, but it's knowing our communities. Communities don't want things done to them. They want things done in partnership with them. And we have to learn from previous communities that have come into England and settled here. And we've seen the cycle revolve from Southeast Asian communities and now the Eastern European communities, and now obviously we've got the Ukrainian community. But we've got to learn from those situations and examples. And I don't think we've done that quite well, to be fair.
Can I just chip in at the end? It's a really difficult question you've asked, because you talked about these budgets that I can imagine are so strung up in red tape and very little flexibility. about how you can spend them. And I actually think that's where we need to start. We need to start at that strategic commissioning level to say, hang on, we're not doing this the right way. We need to get that narrative of one size doesn't fit all, and a place-based approach and a needs-based approach. So for this one, I think we need to be going to the top of the tree and starting there.
And when you're at the top of the tree, then looking at localised commissioning and not commissioning one service to serve the whole city. And I think even when you look at like we're based Bradford South, and even Bradford South has got so many different communities that all have different needs, and that's one locality that is commissioned often as one central commission. So I think away from kind of centralised commissions, away from even localised south, east, centre commissions, and really grassroots commissions.
Thank you, and we've got a question on the second row here at the front, please.
So I think my question actually might be for you, Catherine. So I'm from NHS England, and I've been working with on the Bradford Place programme with Kate Allwright and with Lynn and Kerry. And they made that exact point to us. So we're trying to get together to kind of feed that back on a national stage and to policymakers. So I guess I'm kind of asking, how can we best support you? How can we get that message back nationally? What's the message you want us to take back nationally about funding? And yeah, those of you in the room that are managing that local funding are probably the people to ask. But yeah.
It was actually the next question. How would you feed back things that is useful for policy decision makers? So it's exactly the question I was going to ask as well. And I think in terms of your work directly with the different and diverse communities of Bradford, what would your answer to that be? Because you're there at the coal face with these communities. Naveed?
I think you've got a massively powerful voice with the Citizens Alliance in the first instance. You've got 20,000 students, was it? I think they represent the group of young people. And that's a massive voice. You know, that's a voice that needs to be heard. It is being heard, we heard that, but it's a voice that continues to need to be heard. So I think that's a starting point, in all fairness.
Any other panel members, Rosie?
Well, I think it is about making sure that people ears are open and that they're ready to listen. And I think from my reflection, so the Born in Bradford research programme, we have over 50,000 Bradfordians actively involved in our study, and we can pump out all the facts and figures that we like about what influences ill health, but actually some of the most powerful work that we have done is when we are taking the voice of our community and our participants, and it might be, you know, children taking pollution monitors on their way to and from school, or people talking about asthma, or people walking around their environment to show us what it's like where they live. Those are the actual really powerful things that I think chime with policymakers. So I think it is incumbent upon those of us who are working in that area to make sure that actually we're pushing those messages out in lots of different ways. And then what we need from the commissioners and the decision makers is that ears open, ready to listen. And I think you guys, you know, can help us with that.
Thank you, Rosie.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think it's really important just to put ourselves in a space where we're not being bogged down by this issue. You know, we're not thinking that, oh, this is such a big deal that we can't deal with it. It's a continuum. It's a process, and it's a process that will continue over the next 100 years, 200 years. You know, like you mentioned about ABCD, I don't think there's a moment or a time and space where it's going to happen and then everyone does it. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's something that we drip feed, and it's something that continually comes across. Young people's voice has to be in policy. You know, the first thing on your manifesto is Alina. The very first thing on her manifesto and the group there was listen to us, listen to what we're saying. And I don't think that's like, oh, well, it's not like the climate crisis where by 2025 we need to have 0%. It's something that needs to happen continuously in our services, and it has to happen all the time. It just has to keep happening. And that's the stuff we need to feed back to you as funders, that actually this is raw material, this is raw information that we're getting from our communities, and this is how you need to be thinking about how you deliver your funding.
Thank you, Camille. I'd just add to that and just say we've worked hard for the last 5 years in the Bradford opportunity area to capture learning, to capture our impact. So the report you've got in your packs this morning is actually demonstrating not just the impact, but the lessons. It's not all gone smoothly, but I think we've been honest about that. And where we think things work, we'd like government to listen and get behind more of our work to tackle these structural inequalities. So I'd really say, look, we're working hard to demonstrate what we're doing well at. Please listen and invest and help us do what we're good at. And you can see what we're good at through these 5 panellists here. Naveed?
Sorry, just one more point. And I suppose it's about your monitoring evaluation mechanisms and tools and how you do that. You know, for years and years, we've just reported paper reports and analytic information, but, you know, and numbers, and it's not about that. It's actually the story behind the baseline, outcome-based accountability. And also the voice of young people, but let's be creative about how we report back to funders and you know, the DFE or the government or whoever else is commissioning that. Let's be creative about that. I think it's time we were moving with the times and not being so, you know, pedantic.
Thanks, Naveed. I just want to focus our thoughts on parents as part of communities, because I know we've got a lot of schools and early years providers and people who work with parents and young people in the room. And I think it's important, so if I can ask a question panel around parental engagement specifically, what are the challenges that have presented themselves when you've undertaken community or parental engagement? So thinking about parents specifically. Naveed, do you understand?
Yeah, seeing as it was my role for a number of years, almost a decade, I think I'll keep this one off. Parents have got their own adverse experiences. You know, we have to understand that the adverse childhood experiences of an individual can cause a lot of trauma for a many number of years moving into adulthood. So we have to understand their own experiences. And if we're talking about education, then we have to understand the parents' own experience of education. So how outwardly facing an organisation are we? No, it's lovely to see there's a wide range of diverse professionals and people within the audience. And I would say, well, how reflective is that within our organisations? We talk about being, and I came from a school that had 38 languages represented. Now that's a huge amount of language. That's a great resource. That's a wealth of knowledge, history, information, geography, you name it. You know, and that's really powerful. But if we don't take time to understand that, and another thing I would say here is that the children are your most powerful tool in parental engagement. I used to have children dragging their parents into school. You know, we were talking, a school had 94% attendance in the heart of Little Horton. Within 3 years, they were 97.5, smashed the national average. And that's Little Horton in Canterbury. So it can be achieved. Pupils and children are your most powerful resource. And if you can understand their needs and support their needs, you're halfway there to winning the hearts and minds of your community. And I think it is that. It's about hearts and minds. And it's about being visible in the playground, come rain or shine. I'm talking school specific. I know the professionals will talk about their own areas and their professions, but it's about being visible, being in the playground, come rain or shine. I remember one of the parents said to me, that head teacher's fantastic. And I asked the question, why do you believe so? And she turned around and said that mother, and her English wasn't the first language, and she said, because he asks me how I am every single day. And that's all it was. And for her, he was the best head teacher on the planet. And so it's about hearts and minds, and it's about those small little gains like we've heard before. So in terms of parental engagement, it's about building a rapport, a relationship with them where you can add value to their life. And it's about what can you do for me? And the very first question I was asked when I went for a post within school was a parent panel. I don't often see them. We see school council, they interview senior posts, and we see teachers, and we see governors, and we see chairs and trustees, and very, very few instances have I seen a group of parents actually interview roles for senior leadership. It doesn't have to be senior leadership, it can be any role, in fact. And the first thing the parent said to me is, what are you going to do for me? And I'll never forget that. And I said to him, give me the job and we watch. I didn't know what else to say. No, it's not like me. But that's the journey. And we built a fantastic rapport. And I suppose it's been flexible, and taking yourself out of your comfort zone. You know, my comfort zone is not sitting on a stage and being part of the panel, I have to say. No, I'm lying. But yeah, that's
I'll just echo what Naveed's just said there, in that I think that's key. The lady that says standing at the front gates and smiling. I've visited Matthew's school in Bowling Park, and I know he adopts a similar methodology. And us as a community organisation, I think, have an element of advantage in the sense that we're slightly we're seen less as authoritative, because there's that barrier to overcome within a school setting, that you're seen as authority. But knocking on the door of your families and your parents and just having a normal conversation of how are you, and getting to the hearts and the minds of the people that you're working with, has been key. And we saw it in lockdown when a lot of other services went to remote working. We stayed knocking on the doors, we stayed social distancing, and seeing our parents, eyeballing them when they've had no adult interaction all week because they're in lockdown and they've got the kids at home and they're going out of their mind and they want to talk. And there's so many other things I could have been doing. There's so many other doors I needed to knock on that day, but there's one or two parents that want my time for 40 minutes. I haven't really got 40 minutes to give up. However, I need to build the trust with the families that we're working with. So that 40 minutes is time that I can't afford not to give up. And I think when we've got really pressured jobs, really pressured schedules, it's really easy to just do this tick box of winning hearts and minds and quick knock on door and then run off again, and quick conversations, how are you? And you're walking off before someone's even answered how they are. But if we genuinely care about engaging with our parents and communities, we need to ask people how they are, look them in their eyes, wait for the response, and if there's a need that needs responding to immediately, that we respond immediately. That it's not, oh sorry, I've got a meeting, I'll phone you back, and then you never actually get round to it because the day runs away. We all know that. To-do lists are always going to be there, and the day will always run away and have too much to cram into it. But that genuine care is smelt a mile off from people, and if you're not genuine and you're doing it as a tick box exercise, that is also smelt a mile off too.
Sorry, go on.
Cheers, boss. So it's really obvious what underpins the examples that both of you are given is that actually we're going to where they are, where parents are. We're not trying to make our lives a lot easier. Nobody wants to travel across the city when it's school closing time at 3 o'clock and go stand on a gate. Nobody wants to do that. I know I can see on the faces of everyone who wants to travel in Bradford, sat in traffic when it's weather like this. We don't want to do it. But let's not think that hard to reach is hard for them to reach us. It's actually for us. We make it difficult. We think of all the things that are going on in our work lives and our schedules, and we say, oh, it's really hard to reach them. That group of people are hard to reach. They're not actually. They're there. We just have to get there. And I suppose some of the tools is thinking about some of the left field ideas of where people are. Hairdressers. Everybody needs a haircut. You will see a load of dads sat in the hairdressers for an hour. Guaranteed. You go to any hairdressers in Bradford, you will find 5 dads. If look at the food banks, there's parents and families at food banks. This is the national crisis that we're in. They are there. Speak to people whilst they're there. And I suppose for me, it's just bringing yourself awake and alive to the fact that we have to go to them. And to truly engage, we have to find them where they are.
And just to bookend this, so I think this really links back to what we said at the start, is that effective community engagement and doing this genuinely and not doing it tokenistically, look how much work it is. Look how much time you need to be spending out in communities. And so my, plea to people that have the budgets and the commissioners is you need to start funding this properly, because if you don't fund this properly, you are paying lip service to it and your services will suffer as a result. So we need to start putting our money where our mouth is to support this amazing work that's going on, because it's not going to happen otherwise. So we need a shift at the top.
Thank you, Rosie. Back to Naveed and then we'll...
Sorry, I'm just on Cameron's point of hard to reach. For decades, we heard the notion of hard to reach, but I'm going to flip that on its head and say we need to reach harder. And it's as simple as that. So in terms of the exploitation world, sometimes as professionals, we're the only constant in the young people, families' lives. And the amount of times I hear, I'm on my 10th, 12th, 15th worker, from whatever agency, it doesn't matter. But the fact that, the revolving door of professionals within a family's life or a parent's life is far too often a barrier in itself. And so sometimes when we hear that there's organisations that are doing home visits because children are not in school, and so when I ask the question, are you doing home visits? Yes, we are. And so the child's not been in school for 3 months, but we do home visits on a daily basis. And my question is, when's the last time you saw the child? 3 months ago. Then you're not doing home visits. And that's what it boils down to. You're not doing home visits. And it boils down to, again, the question that Cam said, we know when our young people are frequenting. We've got to support our parents within that. And if parents feel supported, that's where they'll feel a trust element. So I think, yes, it cannot be tokenistic. And there is certainly much more that we can do as organisations and professionals to meet the needs of our parents. I think Matthew's got a question.
Thank you. I love the fact that I've got this community engagement panel because they're so used to engaging they can just self-organise. They don't really need it. It's fantastic. So I think we've got a quick question from Matthew and then I need to move into a summing up. Matthew.
Yeah, it really is a quick question. Absolutely, before I start, it is wonderful to be part of this conversation, to hear the way that you are articulating and describing the position. I really do think all the things you've said are true, and I think respect and being valued is hard work, and that notion of persistence and respect is key to success. So if, given all that you've seen, if you could dream a simple dream of schools being genuinely hubs in their community, what additional services would you like to see added?
So it's not a service for me. And shout out, I'm a former bowling park student. And I know that I've been watching from the sidelines and I've seen you guys do it really well. It's not a service, it's about true representation. The question was posed earlier on about governors and retaining governors that are diverse, that look like the communities we work with. For me, it's not just about governors, it's not about non-paid staff, it's about when are we going to see the next Black, Asian head teacher in the city? When are we going to see the next assistant or deputy head teacher in the city that's Black or a person of colour? And for me, services, you can have a million services, but until you represent the community that you work within, you're not really going to be, you're just scratching at that surface.
Thank you. Naveed?
The question is posed by a man who knows the answer better than the one who's answering it at the moment, I think. Matthew's he's a phenomenal gentleman, he really is, and he understands community and he understands his parents and he works tirelessly. Ultimately, to me, we're educators, we're nurturers, and I'd like to see us being organisations that nurture families from the day the children were born till the day they become adults, and fostering environments where, they're leaders. Our young people of today are leaders of tomorrow. And these are not just words, honestly. This is a heartfelt plea to us all to carry on the amazing work that you're doing. And the reason why you're here is because you care passionately about it. But ultimately, I'd like to see us take that child on a journey from adolescence to adulthood and say, yes, we were instrumental in achieving every single thing that child and family achieved because we were there at the heart of it all. We celebrated the highs and we were there to comfort them on their lows, and that's what it is for me.
Thank you. So I'm going to have to move to a summing up because we've literally 4 minutes. I'm really sorry, but let's continue the conversation in and amongst these. So what we've heard is bottom-up approach, not a top-down model. That trust, time and deeper listening is really important. Co-design and understanding communities, what they want themselves is really key. We've talked about grassroots commissioning and making sure the government listens and backs us in what we want to do next. Children are the best route to parental engagement and finding out, who finding them where they are and reaching harder into communities is what we've heard from our panel members. So literally, the last thing I'd like our panel members to do is if your experience of community engagement could be summed up in a few words, Naveed. What words best describe these and why? Rosie, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Humbling, rewarding, and so worthwhile.
I think I'm going to go for honest. Scary place. That's 2 words. And the need for it.
Thank you, Kamit. Naveed?
You're not going to get 2 words, sorry. Matthew, just on Matthew's point, hierarchy of needs, Maslow's, to provide that triangle for all of the children. That's that point. And on this point, it's just put yourself in the shoes of your families and your people that you're working with, living their life.
Thank you. And Lauren?
I'm also going to be a rebel and just go back to Matthew's point. And very quickly, I think the system we have around PRUs and around alternative education provisions and kids being excluded needs to be addressed. And that's one of my biggest dreams, that actually the mainstream education system fits all. And it's not just one size fits all, A to C's or 1 to 10, whatever the gradings are now, but actually it suits all, and there's creative education in there as well, because we've lost creativity. But back to the words, 1 word, sorry, honest, your word, eye-opening, painstakingly, interesting.
So I have more than 1 word as well, but I would definitely say difficult. I think rewarding, but also inspiring. And I would say truly inspiring that people having worked with Lauren has really, it's been rewarding. It's inspiring that people and everyone here on the panel is working hard, to keep trying to solve the issues. They just keep going at it. Inspiring that they don't stop and continue doing it despite how sort of slow the efforts might be. So,
thank you, Mallory. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for in terms of engaging with the communities. I hope you've enjoyed our discussion this morning. Thank you to our panel members. Thank you to you, our audience. So now we have, all the way from Bailey, I think we have the amazing St John's School Choir. If you can welcome these pupils to our stage.
Just to reassure you, the buffet is very large. You don't need to go. You're not going to miss any food. There's lots of food.
When the race is nearly done, and I feel like I go on, I know I can do something about it. My heart will start to race, my body find the motion, and I will feel empowered from within. I've got the power in me, you've got the power in you. I've got the power, got the power in me. Nobody's gonna hold
delegates, we move to a networking session for half an hour. Please do replenish yourselves and get some sandwiches, and we'll see you back here at the blue stage or the orange stage.